Hello. The Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle in 1748 brought an end to the War of the Austrian Succession, but it was a fragile peace. Colonial rivalry and the struggle for supremacy in India, North America and elsewhere led to several clashes with France and to proxy wars around the globe as other powers sought to take advantage by aligning themselves with one side or the other. At home, naval resources were concentrated around the English coast to guard against a surprise invasion in the event of outright war. News that a French fleet was gathering at Toulon rang warning bells about a possible attack on the British garrison at Fort St. Philip at Port-Mahon on the island of Minorca, which had been in British hands since its capture from the Spanish in 1708, something we covered in part 9 of this series, and which was protected by just 3 warships. Rear Admiral John Byng was promoted to Vice Admiral and given command of a squadron with orders to contain the activities of the French fleet at Toulon and deal with the threat to Minorca. John Byng had joined the Navy aged 13 in 1718, son of Rear Admiral George Byng. He came from a privileged background, but as a younger son there was no inheritance to look forward to, and he needed to make his way in the world. Serving mainly in the Mediterranean, he was a lieutenant at 19, captain at 23, and made Rear Admiral in 1745, before promotion to Vice Admiral in 1747, when he was made Commander-in-Chief of the Mediterranean Fleet, at the age of 43. Byng's sailing orders arrived late, leaving insufficient time to fully prepare and plan his expedition. The 10 ships allocated for the mission were barely seaworthy, undercrewed and poorly maintained. His concerns were dismissed, and Byng sailed from Portsmouth on the 6th of April 1756, arriving at Gibraltar to the news that a large body of French troops had already landed on Menorca. The commander at Gibraltar inexplicably refused instructions to supply Byng with a force of marines. Sailing on, Byng arrived off Minorca on the 19th of May, where he was intercepted by the French fleet before being able to establish contact with Fort St. Philip. Several ships were damaged in an engagement on the following day, the opening clash in what would become known as the 7 Years' War. When the French fleet withdrew, Byng's flag captain, Arthur Gardner, suggested they give chase in the expectation the rest of the squadron would follow their example. Byng, perhaps mindful that Admiral Thomas Matthews had been court-martialed for doing just that, rather than following Admiralty instructions to hold the line, one of the events covered in part 11, decided against any pursuit. After 4 days patrolling the area without any sign of the French fleet, and still without any contact with the garrison ashore, Byng retreated to Gibraltar, for repairs to be carried out, the wounded to receive medical attention, and to load provisions and hopefully reinforcements before returning to Minorca to attempt to lift the siege of Fort St. Philip. Before he could do so, instructions were received ordering him to relinquish command and return to England, where he was arrested and taken into custody. Fort St. Philip held out until the 29th of June, before finally being forced to agree terms of surrender, under which the garrison was allowed passage back to England. Minorca and the strategically important deep-water harbour at Port-Mahon was now under French control. Byng was charged with breaching the Articles of War and tried by court-martial, where he was acquitted of cowardice but convicted on the charge of not doing his utmost. The Articles of War had been revised a decade earlier during the War of the Austrian Succession. To remove any ambiguity, capital punishment was mandated for an officer found guilty on that charge of failing to do their utmost against the enemy. Once the court had reached a guilty verdict, there was only one outcome. But the court's decision came with a recommendation to the Lords of the Admiralty and King George for leniency. The First Lord of the Admiralty, Richard Grenville Temple, made a personal appeal to the King. 4 members of the Court-Martial Board petitioned Parliament for permission to speak on Byng's behalf. The House of Commons was willing, but the Lords rejected the idea. Prime Minister William Pitt the Elder, told the King the House of Commons was inclined to mercy. The King remained unmoved. On the 14th of March 1757, John Byng was led onto the quarterdeck of HMS Monarch at Portsmouth Harbour. Kneeling on a cushion in front of the crew and men from surrounding ships, he dropped a handkerchief as a signal, and a platoon of Marines opened fire. The French writer and philosopher Voltaire famously alleged the Admiral was shot to encourage the others. Byng was buried in the family vault at All Saints' Church, South Hill in Bedfordshire, where a memorial reads, "To the perpetual disgrace of public justice, the Honourable John Byng, Esquire, Admiral of the Blue, fell a martyr to political persecution, March 14th in the year 1757, when bravery and loyalty were insufficient securities for the life and honour of a naval officer." A sad episode. Victory in the 7 Years' War with France brought colonial gains, but complacency and underfunding of the Navy once again followed. Meanwhile, the French opened a school of naval architecture and set about modernising and increasing their fleet. The War of American Independence provided an opportunity for both France and Spain to pitch in against Britain. The loss of America and the mixed experiences at sea in that conflict spurred renewed investment in the Royal Navy, including a programme of copper bottoming of hulls to protect the timbers from shipworm and marine weeds. A new, more effective system of signalling was introduced, contributing to preparedness for the challenge to come during the French Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars. They will be my subject next time. If you've enjoyed this video, hit the like and subscribe buttons and click on the notification bell to be informed when the next video is available, or you can subscribe by clicking on the rose window over my shoulder.